think that we all felt over here that the drama of the Oprah interview and the fallout of the following few days, that this was now going to be a time for the family, as the palace said, to try and sort things out behind closed doors. Then all of a sudden yesterday, we see one of Meghan's very close friends talking very publicly on a huge platform in America and divulging more personal information. It's difficult. We're sitting watching it, hearing her talk about the fact that the family are trying to deal with this privately, and yet here she is on a huge platform like that talking about it so publicly. How is this going down in America?
Well, really, I think the royal soap opera continues on this side of the pond. I think following the Oprah interview, there was a huge swell in sympathy for Harry and Meghan. Americans were very proud to see one of their own marry into the royal family. There's long been a fascination here with all things relating to the British monarchy. But suddenly hearing about their struggles firsthand, as they did, I think there was a real backlash towards the monarchy. And there's a sense of negativity towards them. It's definitely Team Sussex on this side of the pond. But I think if this type of private information being shared with everybody continues, there's the potential for there to be a backlash and suddenly their brand be damaged. So I think they're going to have to be careful in terms of who's speaking on their behalf. Certainly Gayle King is a good friend of Harry and Meghan, but when a third party gets involved, you're suddenly left thinking, did Harry and Meghan say that exactly? Or is this Miss King's interpretation of what Harry and Meghan said? The waters start to get a little muddied, and that's what then complicates things further.
Maya, this is a problem, isn't it? When you speak out publicly, and Meghan and Harry wanted to speak their truth, but as soon as you tell your story, people, the media, commentators, the general public, the family that you're criticising, will all come back and have their say. And you don't have any control over what people say in response to what you've said. So you can't just lay out your side of the story and think that that's an end to it.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, as has been said, this kind of briefing, it's not necessarily ideal. It is something that happens, perhaps not so overtly all the time. But yes, it really does sort of amplify some of these divisions. But as you've sort of said, I do think that there's sort of two things to note here. Is one is now really whether the royal family can change, can sort of recognise these really serious and important allegations about the kinds of racism that Meghan Markle faced when she was in the UK. But I also, secondly, think it's not that surprising that she would go to trusted friends in the media, given how parts of the UK media have treated her. And I think, for me, one of the most startling things has been some of the responses to that interview in parts of the media, and even seeing some of those front pages today and the kinds of coverage. You know, we saw the Society of Editors issue this statement saying that there was no racism in the British media, and there was a big pushback from journalists and writers of colour. And there was a statement saying, this is really ridiculous to say that there is no racism in the British media. I signed that statement because I know in my work, a lot of the research that I've done is that we find that racism is reproduced in the British media all of the time, and so, or really often. And so I think this idea that that Meghan Markle would maybe go to some more trusted friends does sort of make sense. But I would say that this kind of briefing probably isn't that helpful in the long run.
Andrew, how inclined do you think the royal family will be to continue those conversations and trying to carry on to heal this rift when they see anything or the initial conversations being shared so publicly?
Well, we have to remember where we start with this. They gave a 2-hour prime-time interview to Oprah Winfrey, which has been broadcast to 49 or 50 million people. That's a pretty public way of conducting your negotiations, or as my late mum would say, airing your dirty washing in public. And there's always going to be speculation. Has Charles talked to his brother? Has Charles talked to Harry? Had William talked to his brother? You don't expect a private conversation. That's what everybody's saying, a private conversation. She admitted, Gayle King, it was a private conversation between father and son, two brothers, to be broadcast all over primetime American television. It's not the way any family should negotiate, let alone the royal family. I'm sure they will talk to Meghan at some point, but I suspect that's going to be pushed back a bit because Gayle King is Meghan Markle's friend. Prince Harry had never heard of her until he started dating Meghan Markle and married her. It's her friend, and that's why this has got into the public domain.
Kevin, one of the things that Gayle King said was that they were frustrated that there were still false stories circulating around Meghan, around the couple. I mean, you know, you're a journalist on one of the tabloids that she doesn't have, you know, she feels that she doesn't have a great relationship with. But I just wonder whether, you know, they will ever be satisfied with the coverage that they get. Because as soon as you do launch into a critical attack on the royal family, there's going to be pushback against that as well. So, you know, at what point does this get... At what point do they feel content with the way that they are covered?
Oh, I think now it's at the stage only if it's complete propaganda in their favour. I remember the period when they got married and shortly afterwards, it was a sea of deference in the newspapers. I used to be critical of my own. I used to hang my head. There was no racism involved in any of that. They were just going to be the future faces of the royal family. They were widely welcomed. The day they got married, I wrote a piece, would have been for the Sunday Mirror, which was critical of the security costs and everyone. Why was everyone bending the knee and falling around over the royals? It didn't get in the paper. It all fell apart later for lots of family rows, but also becoming equal warriors and then going around on private jets. You couldn't have that contradiction. I think now they will never be satisfied. But I can't see why or how this family row, when it involves an institution in Britain, hereditary monarchy, that's accused of racism, how it could be swept under the red carpet anyway. Now, that was the intention of the Queen with her elegantly worded 61-word statement. But these are two people in the state who feel they have genuine, deep grievances, who will want to carry on airing them. You can say it's very sad it's being done in public. I understand what Andrew Pierce is saying in what his late mother feels. My mother too would feel it would be wrong for a family to be arguing in public like this. But the Sussexes, Harry and Meghan, ain't going to stop. And over there in the States, they're applauded for what they're doing. Here in the UK, reaction is much more mixed. I think a majority of people are against them, but younger people of colour, are for them. So you can see the UK is very disunited.
Well, I think what they said in the interview clearly struck a chord with you know, a significant number of people, and those concerns do have to be, you know, taken very seriously. The thing is, Maya, that there's two things, aren't there? There's the issues that they raised, and those, you know, the allegations and the claims and her experience of what the way that she feels that she was treated. All of that absolutely has to be taken seriously. But separately, there is a family breakdown here, you know, and that cannot be dealt with any way other than the family talking to each other. And when you talk to each other, you need to be able to talk with trust.
Mm-hmm.
And
trust is key, isn't it?
And if you think that the next phone call you make is then going to be broadcast internationally, that's not going to help a family come back together, is it?
Yeah, I mean, rather unpopularly, I think I'm not like so interested in the ins and outs of the royal family and the ins and outs of their sort of their personal fallings out. And as you've said, the part of the reason for this great interest in the story for a lot of people, I know there's a big chunk of the population who do really like following the royal family, and that's fine. But I think for some people, it really was about the kinds of racism that Meghan Markle talked about. And for me, it's a shame that we never really got to talking about more systemic racism in Britain, and not just thinking about the forms of racism that she's experienced. But yeah, I do think, as you've said, it doesn't really help those kinds of discussions. I think that it seems from everything that's been said, both from Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and the royal family more broadly, that there's been a massive breakdown in trust. And I think that Meghan Markle in that interview did talk extensively about the feeling that they were sort of working against her, or weren't working to support her, I suppose, in the media. And I guess this kind of counter briefing is maybe tied up with all of those emotions and those feelings around whether there was that support or not, and how she's then been covered in the press. But for me, it's maybe the ins and outs of this are maybe something I'm a bit less interested in. I wish we'd sort of got more to thinking about how racism is covered in the British media, how we understand racism, and, you know, how this is more broadly tied up with structural racism in Britain, given everything that's happened with COVID and given some of the worst outcomes for Black and Asian and minority ethnic people.
Yeah,